Kenyon Adamczyk is a very funny comic. He's from Raleigh,
okay,
but he lives in New York, but he started in Raleigh as well. Whereas I'm kind of the opposite. I'm from Durham. I did open mics in college in Syracuse, which is upstate New York. And then I went. We're recording, right?
Yeah. It's
okay.
all,
Cool.
it's all
Just making sure. And then I moved to New York City right after graduation. That's when I really started, probably like late 2014, early 2015.
Yeah.
So I've been at it for a little bit now. Like I'm coming up on a year. I'm coming up on
decade.
year 10.
Yeah.
Excuse me. It's a year.
I knew what you meant.
Yeah.
A year, decade. That's how it is in comedy. Like 10 years is like a year. It's
Yeah,
like
it feels
with
like
other
it.
things.
Yeah,
where
yeah,
you might
yeah.
be expect to be real good after a year.
Right. It's been fun. I was thinking about this the other. How long have you been doing it now?
This is my 9th year stand up. Yeah.
Nice. Okay, cool.
Yeah, but I've been in
So
Nashville
similar.
the whole time, so I'm just now trying to just in the last year
Branch
trying
out.
to do like regional touring.
I feel you, man. It's really fun, and I do when I see people that are just starting. I'm not saying this because when their material is bad or something, but like I think back to when I started and how much more shit's like how scary doing a show would be, or just to like an open mic
In the beginning.
Yeah, I felt like, maybe it was because I was like somewhat young. Here's how I felt like when I first started doing open mics in Syracuse, which would be like very sporadically. I was super nervous, but I also I was like a college student. I didn't really know who I was very much, like a lot of college students, even though they sometimes adopt a personality that they think is theirs. And I was like, no, this seems more like the internet. You just seem but then when I really felt like I was starting, I had lived a little bit. I had learned how to going from being a child and not being able to really do anything on your own. And then you're like, oh, I pay my rent. It's not, I basically just pay my rent and then all my money is gone. But I'm like, I make money at a job. I can navigate New York City, which I just have more confidence in myself as a person. Yeah. And
just being a person in New York, I think count is like more than most people do in their life.
Right. Just, it's pretty stressful. But I will say, it definitely made me, when I started, I knew I wasn't going to be good, but I knew what kind of material I wanted to do. Whereas like when I was in college, I felt like I was doing an impression of stand-up. Like I was like, these are the kind of things people say.
Was it a particular, because that comes up a lot on this pod, that like it's really common to see a first year comic and you know exactly who their main influence is, like they move and sound like them.
Right. Oh, Louis C.K. for me.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That was the time. But
He was the king at that time.
And I was like, I'm a balding redhead, so with kids.
Yeah. Him and
I
Burr
think,
must have been huge for you.
Yeah. More Louis than Burr, honestly. Like, Burr is, I respect it, but it's
just not your
shrill.
Yeah.
Shrill.
So he's so.
But he's amazing. I mean, of course. So that was what you were coming in with like 10 years ago.
Yeah, I think it was like, it was like Louis, and then I know this sounds stupid, but I was, I was a skinny guy that was like, I was like skinny and kind of like exuberant and I was like charming in like a dumb way. So I was really, this is kind of embarrassing now. I was definitely also influenced by like Dane Cook.
Oh yeah.
I wasn't doing like super physical comedy like he did.
Okay, see, he's one of those ones. It's almost like Bruce Springsteen in the '90s. Like you had to act like you hated him because it was so like cynical.
Right.
But I think Dane Cook is like that, where everybody now is like, I like Dane Cook. But at the time, it's like you had to be like fucking Dane Cook.
Oh, totally.
He didn't come up through the clubs or whatever whatever his credibility stuff was. But I think it seems like now people are just admitting that they liked him all along.
Right.
I hear that more and more.
If you think about like what comedy is like at its like all the things he was made fun of for are like the way people do comedy, but like him on MySpace is like the reason like people like Matt Rife are really big on TikTok. It's like all the same thing,
and people love to hate on him now too. I'm like, what's the problem? I don't know.
No,
people are having a good time. Like people in that room, just fucking leave them alone. Like
I think that is just resentment because I think a shocking number of comedians, guy comics, got into comedy to get laid.
Yeah.
And it's like when you see a guy that like looks like a model who's doing stand up and has like young women as his entire audience, I'm sure that makes him. But whereas I look at him and I'm like, I don't know. I don't want to do that kind of like it's not like he's taking an audience that I would really like. Also, it's kind of like Dane Cook, and it's like a lot of Dane Cook fans, myself included, liked him when he was doing those early albums, and then they grew up, and then they started getting into more like dark comedians, like a Louis, like a
it was the gateway drug where you could
So there's anyone who just brings attention to stand up. This isn't an original idea. I think I heard Pete Holmes say this once, like years ago, but I was like, anyone who's like bringing eyes to stand up is like, it's good for all comedians, you know?
Yeah, once you get through there, because it's like, how many of your first bands are still your favorite bands? You know? It's like, you got to just love music. Yeah. And then you might get into like more grown-up things or sophisticated things later.
Yeah. Whereas like his stand-up to me is like, I think because of how famous he is, it will probably backfire in terms of like he's gonna have a point.
Are we talking about Rife now?
Yeah, Rife. He's gonna have a point where it's just like the dust is gonna settle a little bit, and he will either like evolve as an act, or he'll double down on like who he was previously, which I think is a comment. Like that's kind of. Did you watch the George Carlin documentary?
A recent one?
Yeah, the one on HBO. It was like it's so good. I highly recommend it for any comic to watch it. It's so fascinating.
Yeah,
because
I read his book, and he's like, I'm very like much infatuated with him and Pryor as like the
me too.
Lennon and McCartney of what modern stand up is.
I think that's perfectly
but I didn't know
put.
There was a new documentary.
He wrote. Yeah, that is Lennon and McCartney is cool. I was gonna say the Beatles and Michael Jackson, like because it's like they're expanding the art form in such like huge ways, and then also because one's super white and one's black.
Michael Jackson's actually better because it's like there's a lot more fucked up shit there too.
Right, Richard Pryor and Michael Jackson have similarities. I think in terms of who I think the GOAT is, I think it's Richard Pryor, but who has the best body of work, I would say it's Carlin, because he just has
album after album after album.
It's like 30, and it's like good.
Yeah.
He also does this thing that's fascinating. Well, I'm sorry, I'm super tangential.
No, you're encouraged to contradict yourself, go on tangents, never come back.
I'm gonna lie.
Say things that tomorrow you won't agree with. It's very loose.
Okay, cool.
No structure.
Cool. I feel like the thing that was cool about Carlin is that he always remade himself even through criticism. It's kind of why I'm like it's why I find like Chappelle's newest iteration kind of annoying,
because he's staying stuck on the
right. Like I keep using other comedians' quotes to create my own personality. So, but Jeselnik had this thing where he was talking about like something. I think Andy Warhol said it, or it's like attributed to Andy Warhol, where it's like art is getting away with it.
Yeah.
And so if a bunch of people are mad at you for your jokes and don't think they're funny, you're not getting away with it.
Right.
Like now, obviously, you could contextualize that like you're always going to have people that don't like it.
Yeah.
But if you're getting more, if like the headline of every time you release a special is like says a bunch of shit, that's whereas like there's been offensive specials.
Same shit too. It's like if it's transphobia 3 times in a row, it's like maybe
upset
or like
a
12
times
group.
In a row now.
Right. Yeah, 3 was. It starts to be like, it's
also like so much is going on, and you're supposed to be the greatest of, or like you keep proclaiming you're the greatest of all time.
He is the most. Didn't he make the most last year for whatever that means?
Makes most money,
like highest grossing comedian. I think Chappelle is. So to what degree is he aware that he's doing that? Like Kanye thing.
And what is he? He thinks he's Kendrick, but he's really Drake right now. But he used to be Kendrick to me. Like I feel like Chappelle is one of the most, like in terms of like, the kids say like the bag, it's like he's got a bit deep bag, so that means like he can do a bunch of things. He has a ton of skills. Like he can write. Oh, this is why I think Pryor is better than him though, is because he compares himself to Pryor, which is you're supposed to let other people do that. That's why I don't like LeBron as much as Jordan too. But he has everything. He has every skill that Pryor had, but Pryor had so much more vulnerability.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And Chappelle, I feel like I'd never see his. I thought he was going to get vulnerable.
Yeah,
because he's talking about like these trans.
He's
women.
the cool guy. He's like the cool philosopher. And he becomes a cartoon character, but yeah, he never really does like just bare his fucking soul,
right,
in a way that makes you almost want to cry. Like Pryor would bring out the shit where you're like, oh, there's like the tragedy.
Right. Yeah. Oh my god, his stuff is like.
He was also just not as like Chappelle seems like higher functioning as just an adult person too, whereas like I think Richard Pryor, he lit himself on fire. Like like maybe he's not even capable of showing us anything except all of it.
Right?
That's kind of like part of the appeal is he is a mess, whereas Chappelle seems like a very smart businessman.
Yeah, that's true. So that's a really good point. Yeah, Pryor felt like he didn't. He was like born into distress. Like, and like his childhood is all distress. And of course, like if you experience that level of trauma like it did when he was a kid, like you wouldn't have, like you couldn't really exist as an artist unless you just didn't want to grow as an artist without sharing those like all of his shit feels like it's connected to his childhood in some way.
Yeah, I actually read his book too. Both Carlin and Pryor wrote like amazing autobiographies. I think Pryor had some help from somebody, but it's like, the childhood stuff is just you're just like, whoa.
Yeah, I know. Did he write it with
and
Paul
he just
Mooney?
fucking lays it all on the line too.
Yeah,
I don't think so. I think it was a name I didn't know. I think it's his story, but sometimes it's like let's get it into a book shape a little bit.
Right. That makes sense. Well, I know him and Paul Mooney wrote a lot together, and like sometimes he would be like translating for like white people what Paul Mooney was saying. He was like Paul Mooney would have like the idea for the bit, and then Richard Pryor would kind of like formulate it. So it's like, which by the way, that's like, I mean, that's a little bit like Lennon McCartney right there. Whereas like Lennon was more like the edgy one, and then McCartney was like the one that like could like take
right. That's sort of what I meant. It's like McCartney gets so much shit now. I feel like my whole life everybody's like McCartney's not cool. John was cool, and it's like you wouldn't have heard about John being cool if there wasn't a guy that just knew how to play every instrument. He knew jazz. He was like, let's try this chord. So that the sophisticated, like you needed both. So it's like
100%.
Paul's still alive, and he's never as cool as John. But that's like what he did.
Right.
You
also,
have to have
their hardest
the nerd.
song is him. Helter Skelter is him.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
which is like I think it's like the hardest Beatles song. And it's like if John is supposed to be the hard one, it's just like, well, I mean, Helter Skelter is one of the. It's crazy because I was playing it as an intro when I would do clubs and they'd ask for a song because it's one of the few songs that just starts like it just like immediately goes hard.
They don't have to find the 30-second.
Right. I hate that feeling. You're like, can you go to minute 16? But and then I saw there's a Motley Crue version, and I like Motley Crue, and I played it, and I was like, this is weaker than the Beatles one.
Yeah, similar with is it Live and Let Die? That's another McCartney song.
Oh,
like Guns N'
Roses.
Yeah, it's like it's weird.
Yeah, both versions are great.
Yeah,
I really what was I gonna say?
It's just interesting. These like I never thought there's like two like 80s hair bands that covered McCartney. It's like,
right.
Like it's like he's a badass. Like the hair bands are doing his songs like a decade or two later.
Yeah, I'm not a big James Corden fan, but that I don't know if you watched their carpool karaoke episode, but it's actually really good. It's like it feels like a mini documentary almost because they just drive around Liverpool and they like go to different like landmarks of like the Beatles, and then Paul McCartney just like shares stories.
Oh hell yeah!
And it's
he's always welcome to. He's always up.
Yeah, you come do this podcast. Like why
you're talking about how like
that would be crazy
comparing
if you got Paul
yourself
McCartney.
to Pryor. I feel like McCartney is always like, so we sort of invented MTV. So we sort of like he'll just kind of start saying like they invented like things that is like rock and roll was after you guys like if you get him talking he'll just like take credit for everything maybe doesn't help his legacy.
He like forgets like Little Richard was existed and like Chuck Berry
So do you have a music background too?
No, I love music, but like and I find sometimes watching great musicians, Michael Jackson's one, Prince, just like watching them in documentaries about them or just them on live on stage, or like live concert footage, like really it gets my like blood pumping arguably more than watching stand up, just because we're all like in both art forms, the more interesting art is the more unique original art. And so like when I'm removed from it with comedy, I find it to be like extremely inspiring creatively. Whereas like there's only like a handful of stand-up comedians that I can watch now and I feel like super inspired. Not because there aren't a bunch of comedians that inspire me outside of them. It's just like watching a special. Sometimes I just like get, because I just want to do
it's the same old shit. Yeah, you're like, you get variations on the same theme. You mean like when somebody comes along and you go, whoa, it could be that way,
right?
And it kind of expands what it can be,
right?
Like
and just on TV, it's worse. Like because we get to watch so much stand up live, right? Like, being,
which is what it is. I mean, you can't even really pretend that pixels are.
Oh no, it's not even close.
It's like the smells and the chemistry in the room, and,
right.
Yeah,
and I also think there's just something to. Oh God, what was I? Sorry.
Watching the.
I'll laugh at more things live, and I'll laugh at things that are not original. Like I'm not calling it like hacker or like copying or something, but just like when you're riffing, you're like, and you've never like you end up saying lines. Like I had a line last night that was like the bit itself. I'm like, this is an original take. It's also like very me, and like I'm enjoying doing it. But I did like one riff in it. It was about, like people that say like dom and sub, like sexual like kinks and stuff. And the joke is about like it's like I'd rather like about like a woman being like, oh, you're a dom. And then I'll be like, it like feels. I'd rather you just say I'm strong or something. I miss whereas like, oh, this is your. I don't know. It's like not true. Don't pay attention.
Is it almost like what you're saying? Is
I
like
did it for the first time last night.
You're like instead of you're speaking in hashtags or something where you're just using like the loaded language of the day. It's like make your own sentence. Is it sort of like that?
Right. No, but then the overall crux is like. Then she's like, do you like using like restraints? Like, do you like use handcuffs? And then I have cop jokes that precede that. And it's like, which like, I'm not into, you heard my cop jokes. And then, but then another thing about like, basically when I said the thing about like, I don't like cops, I don't want to use handcuffs, I was like, I feel like that has been said. Like after I said it, I was like, there's gotta be a joke that's happened like that because I don't talk about this subject matter that much.
Yeah.
But
do they all need to be original? Like that's like I was talking with Cody about that where he was talking about Jurassic Park and I
love Cody
Frog.
Hughes.
Yeah, he's the best. There's a kind of a running joke that this podcast is sort of about him because we mostly talk with people in the region and he comes up at every episode at some point.
So
but he uses a Jurassic Park analogy. He's like, there's like the frog DNA. You need to like finish the dinosaur DNA. That like he was saying. As long as you're between two original takes, to use something that's a little more of like a stock line or like hacky's too harsh of a word, but something you've heard before. If it gets you into something that's then new, like every punch doesn't have to be like a new thing. Like, you know what I mean?
I agree with that.
But then it's like there are different levels of it. Where like what percentage of like things that have been said before. There's a few things I want to circle back to. I should first say I've seen you do stand up 2 times. Really enjoy your stand-up.
Oh, thanks,
I'm a fan
man. I
of
appreciate
the way you
that.
do it. And you were talking about just like originality and how you put a lot of value on like seeing people that kind of expand what it is. Like,
right.
Like, do you as being just kind of like what you are and how you present? Like, do you have like techniques or ways? Like, how do you as a stand-up try to do that? Yeah, be different. Do you feel like you said something in there like it's an original take? Do you feel like each joke that you make, you need to step back and be like, this is an angle or this is a way I haven't heard it said? Like,
well, there's certain jokes I have that I'm like, I've never like. I have one joke. I wonder if it would have been a joke at a show you saw me do.
I remember your set at the Cody's taping, and I really loved you. I think you set the whole thing up by saying like, "Period blood is a young man's problem."
Oh, right.
I was there with my wife, and we were both just like, it's so true. It's funny. It's like all the It's just really nice.
Thanks, I
appreciate that. Then you had more jokes on it.
But, the uterine. Yeah, that was. It's a gross joke.
That's probably not the joke you were thinking of, though, is it?
No, I was. I mean, I guess that is that an original take?
I mean, I don't know that I've heard a lot of things about period sex and stand up. I mean, I don't know. You've spent like a lot more time in New York and stuff. So I'm in the Southeast, so
right.
you're probably exposed to a lot more like
That's
different.
true. I've heard a lot of women talk about it. I guess. But I wanted to put a mouthpiece. But the fact the guy that's also like, it's also just like, it's fine.
Yeah, I mean, it's like at my age and like when the kids are, it's like that's the last thing I would stop me from wanting to do that. You know, it's like not a problem at all. So it's like, I think like we felt kind of like represented.
Right. Well, so another thing I feel like, and this is kind of petty, but I wrote that joke because I hated a comic's premise so much that because their joke was kind of like,
ew, I'm not gonna fuck you on your period.
Of the joke. I mean, I'm honest in the bit, and then I'm like, I saw a comedian and like a younger comic, and they were like 22 at the time, do a joke about how period sex is gross. Yeah. And I was like,
I love that.
I just like hated the joke because it kind of went into this.
You're like, I don't like that, so I'm going to write the opposite joke.
Right,
just to kind of like balance this out. And
it can kind of work.
That's an interesting, I'm going to take that with me because I hear
it's not a bad tactic.
Every week at open mics, I hear dudes get up and do something like that.
Yeah.
So that's like a cool trick. Yeah.
That's like all of
That's Charlotte. What this podcast is all about, is like learning more tricks to see what stand-up is.
I'm also kind of taking this idea, not the bit, but like that concept, writing concept, a little bit from, so it's like a little adjacent to something I heard Roy Wood Jr. say, where he was like, if I hear a premise and I think the joke is going to go in this way that I hope it goes, like the joke you want it to be, and then it doesn't go, it goes in completely opposite way. He's like, I've written jokes like that because I'm like, oh, that premise, I thought it was going to be about this, it was about this instead, but now I just wrote a joke based off just like this, and all I have to do is like tweak around it to make it completely indistinguishable from the original joke. He's not saying like steal the premise, he's just like, because we all have super similar, we all, but there's just an umbrella of things we talk about, and you have to be a really avant-garde writer as a comedian to have premises that no one has.
That's why like stories to me are becoming more and more intriguing, because I feel like what happened to me today is inherently my experience.
Yes.
That's but it takes like I think a lot of people like Birbiglia, it's like the first 10 years is like Mitch jokes, like one-liners, and then he's skilled enough at writing jokes that he can weave them into stories. So I feel like a story is just hard at first, but I feel like stories is kind of like a way to just, it's usually just yours, because like there's premises and there's jokes and then there's stories, and
it also fills a lot of time.
Yeah, it fills a lot of time. But if you get like 2 minutes into that story and it's not hitting, then it's like it's hard to get out of. So it's like you have to commit, and that's, I think, and there's been so many times I've been 2 minutes into a story and been like, this is bad.
Yeah, that sucks. It's harder to workshop a story because there's so much room for dead air.
Yeah.
Because you don't have save lines every time necessarily.
Right.
You have to articulate the story. You know what I noticed though? Like one of my favorite comedians, I still love him as a podcaster, and I still watch his stand up and enjoy it. But Tom Segura, I've noticed because he's like one of those, like when I first wanted to do stand up in college, and I would put on like Pandora, and I'd do Pandora comedy, and I'd set it to like Louis C.K. or something. Like his first album would pop up on that a lot. And I loved his first album, and I like his first several specials a lot because they're a combination of stories and bits. And then I realized he's been releasing a lot more and touring a lot more, and I think it's like, because he can just do, because stories are like, he has like a built-in cadence to the way he tells stories.
Yeah.
And then it's like
Bargatze is similar to what you're saying.
Oh my God. Bargatze I think is my favorite though.
Here's what happened to me this week, and it just, there's something about the rhythm and the cadence that an audience is already hypnotized.
Right.
And then you're like, well, I've already got them. Now I'll just figure out where the jokes are.
Right.
I'm so jealous of that. Just the meter and tone of, like, I'm wondering if the longer you do this, if you can actually get more. It's like playing guitar after 10, 20 years, you get a better tone. Right. You get a better sense of rhythm. Like, you ever listen to, like, what's his name? Ron White. Like, have you ever gone back and listened to his early albums? Like, he has a different voice.
Oh, yeah, I bet.
So I've seen that a few times with people, and like Garrison Keillor,
he's a short story dude, right?
Which one? Garrison Keillor?
Yeah.
He's the one that did Prairie Home Companion. He got canceled recently.
He did?
Yeah.
Wait, for what?
Just being like a sleazy old dude, I guess.
Oh.
Nothing like Cosby level, but
yeah.
But yeah, this idea that like I wonder if you can get your voice to be more like that over time.
Right.
That people want to hear just the way you sound.
Yeah. But yeah. I mean, I think people are really but I think that's why, because that's what a fan base is. It's just like, and for a while, that's what Chappelle was someone I was like giddy to go home and watch his special, and then I'm like, this is kind of like you're really obsessed with this one thing, and it's something that I'm not interested in this dude's perspective on this anymore. I thought there were like some good jokes about trans people when he was like at the beginning of
when he was
that
starting
like he had that bit about and even a point that I agreed with, which it was like, well, people care about this now because white men want to do it.
Yeah.
And I was like, that actually I agree with. That's 100. But then he kind of just like doubled down on the just like hating on, and I'm just like, also it's just like, I'm so uncomfortable with like, even if you think it's a joke and your audience gives it like an applause break, I get like uncomfortable when it's like something like that.
Yeah, that's the weird thing about having your own audience, and that, I mean, I don't even expect that to ever happen to me. Like, I really don't. I started stand up kind of like
believe
later.
In yourself.
Yeah, well, I'm like just very happy to be here for like conversations like this and just getting as good as I can. And I have a job, and I tried to make it as a musician for a long time before stand up.
Yeah.
So I mean, I want to like be as good as I can be and tour and get paid as much as I can. But this idea of like you got your own audience. Like I interviewed Gabby Watts from Atlanta for this a few weeks ago, and she had just filmed her special. I was like, how was that? And she was like, it was amazing to perform for a room full of people that already like me.
Oh,
like,
yeah,
because every time we perform, it's a bunch of people that don't even. You have to get them to even want to hear you, and it's like hard, and it doesn't work a lot of the time.
Yeah,
and I think what you're saying is like when you get to that point where you just have, they already like you, and they just want to hear your voice.
Yeah,
I mean, I don't know. Maybe there's like a dark side to that too. Somebody like Chappelle, where it's just like anything, any dark rabbit hole he goes down, people are just going, "Yay, keep doing it." And whereas if he had to go into rooms where people didn't know who the fuck he was, you might get shaped a little differently.
Well, I think it's like pretty telling and kind of gross and weird because it's like, okay, you're doing all this shit, you're saying all this shit about the trans community, and you're saying that you feel like you're being restricted from doing stand-up about trans people because like of some, and it's unfair. But like literally in Tennessee, they made it illegal for a trans person or someone in drag to perform on stage at all. Yeah. So it's like, okay, like you're complaining while you're also getting paid millions of dollars to talk about trans people, saying you're like being silenced. And there's like a bunch of comedians that do this, not just Chappelle. But I'm just like, but then the people you're talking about that you're saying, like that you're making jokes about, literally aren't allowed to in certain areas. Like that's fucking crazy. Like it's just, and look, I also live in Brooklyn, and I've noticed that like there's or I live in New York and I perform in Brooklyn, but there's this thing that's like, I also, not in the same way as I dislike the Chappelle thing, because the Chappelle thing kind of like makes me mad as not just it's just like unoriginal. It also just feels unoriginal because it's like, oh, you don't think a guy can be a girl? Like you're every person for the last hundreds and hundreds of years.
Yeah.
Whereas like it's
not a progressive way of thinking. It's not like
right. It's also just I don't even need it to be progressive, but in stand up, it's like it's just like not an original take. It's like there's comedy about. Back when they like instead of saying trans, they said like tranny. Like there's tons of jokes from the 80s and the 70s about that community that are never flattering or never like done with like some sort of empathetic view. So it's like you're just doing that. He kind of reminds, I've said this before, whereas like he was like on a highway with like no traffic to be the next Pryor, and then he just like all of a sudden at the very last minute just like turned right and exited into like early 90s Dice. Like he just like he had this thing, and it's just like that's fine, but if you're talking about like the GOAT and they're like the greatest, what they do is they change the game, and I don't see him changing it. I think he's actually made it more stagnant because there's this like kind of sycophantic audiences that just want anti-woke comedy.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's almost a reflection of like just the divisiveness is politically. It's just like comedy has its own. There's like the Rogan Bros side.
Right,
I mean, it's not that cut and dry, but then there's like Marin.
Yeah, right,
and it's
right.
like it's like Trump or Biden. It's kind of like, and I'm like, damn, I kind of they both
Trump
seem pretty extreme. It's like, are you totally vulnerable?
Yeah.
To the point where maybe there's some laughs after your vulnerability, or are you like, I'm gonna say those bad words and be a naughty boy up there, and it's like it feels like it's just one more polarized fucking like I don't know if the internet is to blame for it or how
I think it's probably
everything is just like super polarized.
It is weird. It's like everything is so black or white in media. It's both regular media and social media, and it's just kind of hard to. I don't know. It's hard to distinguish what is the fault of the people? What is the fault of the way we're... I mean, I think we could all just, if all our phones just died all at once, it would be really good for us.
Oh, it'd be great. Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah.
Amazing.
They're apparently going to remarket dumb phones. Like they're going to be like, we're bringing back flip phones.
Yeah.
Which I think as a cultural movement would be a great...
Yeah, our kid has a 12-year-old. We got her like a flip phone so she can just be out and she can like text and she can call. Yeah. And it's great. I mean, it's all you need.
Yeah, it's really all you need.
I mean, if it weren't for like, I would not be on social media if I weren't trying to get booked.
Right. Yeah,
so
me neither.
Like,
that's
and now I got a podcast, so I'm on there like even more.
Right. That's why I'm really like, if I were to ever gain an audience, I'd be like, first thing I'm investing in is someone to do all of this for me because I don't want to look at my phone as much. Like, what's the point of enjoying your success if you're still, excuse me, agitated and anxious the way a young comic is that doesn't have anything?
Yeah.
Because I've noticed that from like I had a friend and his name's Randall Otis and he's a writer on The Daily Show and we've known each other for years and he was like he blew up initially on Twitter through this little sketch he made and it was a great sketch, but then he was just like he was so worried about his digital footprint at all times and like how he could release, like when he should release, if something, he'd be like, and I was just like bombing on Twitter, and then he'd be like, God, this only got like 10,000 likes. I'd be like, I would kill for 10,000 likes.
and then he fucking got to be a writer on The Daily Show, so it's like, it worked. So that's the worst part. Right. That's what the sad that you're like, and then he's miserable at his parents' basement. No, actually, that is the game now.
I know. I
try not to look at it like because I will post like a reel for this, but I notice like I just believe what you think about is what you are, So if I go out and like sit and like meditate and look at the trees every morning, that's going to help me like be in touch with real reality. But if I'm like checking my likes casually all day, then stand up starts to become linked to that virtual representation.
Yeah.
And I started because I wanted to be in the room with people.
Yeah, me too.
Same reason I will not do this podcast virtually. It's because it's like we need to be like sharing the air, sharing a moment. We capture it digitally, but it needs to be real,
right?
But if you don't learn to do some of the social media, I mean, I don't think it's realistic to think you're ever going to get booked if you're not on Instagram and Facebook.
I talked to a guy recently. His name's Brett Druck, really funny comic. Not like he's just like a comic kind of guy, and he's super funny. But we were talking about social media, and he was like, what you can always do is keep your Instagram, delete basically everything but like a few really good clips like that have the most love and just use it as like a booking thing. He was like, you could, and I was saying
I love this topic.
Right. Well, this is why
I'm torn on this topic. I'm torn on this topic because I notice everybody does that. They just delete everything, so you just have the big ones left.
Right.
And like, part of me wants to do that, so I look more legit. But the way I look at it is, it's like everything I've ever done. This is my body of work for me later. It's like, if I make a reel and I think it was a good joke, I put it up, and if it doesn't get a lot of views, it sits there not having a lot of views. But it's like, it's for me later, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
When you read a book and you like open it up and it's like also by the author and it's this big thing.
Right.
Like to me, that's kind of how I think of like my Instagram is like I'm chronicling it all for like, I don't know, my kids or me or whoever later. Yeah.
That's a cool way to look at it.
If somebody else likes it, then that's a bonus. But it's ultimately everything, this podcast, it's all for me.
Yeah.
I'm learning about comedy right now. But then you see that's your like mantra to yourself, but then you get like a video that does well,
right,
and then that'll fuck you up more than like all the bad ones because you'll get a taste of that,
right.
The greed of the lizard brain, all the just the dopamine of social media. I don't know. I'm tangenting off to like
no. I mean, I agree with everything you're saying. I mean, I also think like the way I'd want, if I were to be like famous, I only want to be famous to my fans. Like Brian Regan is like the most famous non-famous person ever, because it's like his fans know who he is, but he can still walk around and not be bothered.
Right.
And that's kind of been his whole career. Where it's like Pete Davidson is like the opposite, where it's like he's so famous, everyone knows who he is, and no one knows his material.
Yeah,
which seems like a literal hell to me. Like
yeah,
I'm like,
I know,
I'm a
right?
famous comedian, and no one like knows me from my set. They know more women I've dated than jokes I've told.
I know, that's a really great point. It's like the artist, don't you want your work to be the thing you're known for?
It's
at least as much as like your notoriety.
Yeah. Well, that's my favorite. My favorite. I think the closest thing to the Pryor Carlins currently, I think, is Maria Bamford.
Oh yeah, totally.
She's
totally.
So
100%.
she's everything we were talking about.
She's the new Pryor for sure.
She's totally.
It's
like she has to cancel shows because of mental health issue. Like she has to go to psych wards. She's like, sorry.
It's almost like the number, like with Pryor. That's interesting, like Pryor and Bamford, because it's almost like the number of characters you can be. Like, I mean, the average great comic, how many voices characters can they really become? Like 5? I don't know.
She can do so much.
Just it's endless, and then every new
I love that voice she does.
And they're both like fucked up.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
That is true.
Like
Bamford
tortured.
The
only thing that I hate about her is that, like, or it's more like I just like hate for her. I'm like, I wish you were just healthy. Like I for her sake. Like I wish you could just like not have to worry, because it makes me like so sad for her, because she seems, from all accounts, a wonderful person to everyone she works with. Like I had a friend,
her
Kate.
Money transparency. She's like real kind and different about that.
Yeah. And it sounds like she lives like a pretty modest life, which this is low overhead seems like a really nice way to live.
That's how we roll too.
Yeah.
Don't live beyond your means. If you really want to create art, that's its own.
Yeah.
You need to like be able to travel and get to it.
Right.
You don't need a bunch of
like
fancy
Drake.
shit.
He's got a mansion, but then his mansion was used as a diss track album cover where they put little pedophile like predator things all over. And it's like, now how cool is that mansion? Now it seems less cool because it's tainted mansion. Yeah. That was so. By the way, that was like,
not even fun being in this mansion anymore now.
I could use a little bit more of that in comedy, where it's like the great comedians shit on each other a little more. Whereas like I feel like there's this like dick sucking that all these comics do. Like it's kind of based on that Rogan Squad.
Marin loves to talk shit about all of them.
That's why I love him so much. I didn't realize how much I loved him till recently, and then I was like, whoa! I really liked his HBO special.
Do you like his comedy, or do you like him? Because it can be really different with
I guess
podcasters. Like, because I never found him funny, but then I listened to him talk enough, and interview enough people that I started to like his voice, like we were saying.
Yeah.
And then now I like his jokes, but I'm like, I think I just got tricked into it. Because I heard him talk to all my favorite musicians for like 100 hours.
I feel like it's what we were saying. It's like I'm a fan of him. I just want to hear what he has to say, but I'm not. It's not like I'm watching him the same way that like when I was younger and watched Louis, and I was like, this is like the best comedy ever made. Yeah. I'm just like, I just like this guy. I think
he's a little like, I mean, I don't think he's like Bamford, as far as like changing what it is, but he's kind of like a little bit like
I bet they share
Pryor with the vulnerability. Like I think he was doing 100%, like before the podcast took off, I think he'd been around since the 80s, but he was just kind of like, you never knew what you were going to get. He's a wild card, but he's definitely going to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
But it might not be funny.
He had all those experiences with Kinnison, because he was like, Kinnison's like, but there's no comedian. It's like I hate him like he hurt a friend of mine. I hate Kinnison. I hate him so. I love his early stuff. I like that you said that,
because I feel like I'm the only person that's never gotten, because everyone goes, oh,
it's
Kinnison.
Fucking mascot comedy.
People talk about him like he's the GOAT, and then I watch a little of it, and I'm like, I guess I'm just not getting it.
Yeah, he has a Dangerfield set that I kind of like, but like other than that, like I don't know if you've watched like his special. He's just so like. Someone on the Comedy Store documentary said this great, which was like, because the people that came out of there at a certain time were Dice, him, and Pauly Shore, and it was like they were just like,
Shore's in there.
I know, they're like, I mean,
that's a
certain comics would disagree with me, but I'm like, yo, I'll fucking put I would put Kinnison next to Pauly Shore before I put him next to like Richard Pryor. Fuck that dude. Like he's just a mascot. Yeah, well, he's a fucking lowest common denominator comedian. Whereas like those like there's this article that came out about like how there'll never be like a far right Daily Show because the far right doesn't they don't like irony. They like indignation. So like the whole point of Colbert Report and Daily Show is just like it's making fun of these things, but they're being like it's like masterclass like writing and like not being like these guys are fucking idiots. It's just like, oh, that's a great point, and then you do like the parody satire aspect of that,
right?
But those Kinnison dudes, like Kinnison Dice, they're just like, and what's up with this? Fuck that.
Yeah,
and it's like that's such an easy take to have.
As hell too. That's the part that really like now I'm just
but I guess when I'm on a podcast or something, I want to make it very clear that like when I hate something that's misogynistic, it's like I hate it when it's said off stage as like a human, and when it's on stage, I like want to throw tomatoes at it as like a comedy consumer. Like, you're wasting my time with this fucking like 1979 like Mad Men take. Where I just like,
because it's amplified when it's on the stage. When it's like somebody at work, you're like, well, there's a few of them left still. But when it's on the stage and it's packed and people paid, you're like, whoa, I think we're like amplifying this. Right, this is the future now too.
Yeah.
So yeah, we talked about like divisiveness and stuff like that. Like you mentioned, you like play in Brooklyn. Like Asheville is in this region. It's
Brooklyn.
It's like sure. When you go anywhere, in any direction, like an hour. Like I'm in Kingsport, Tennessee, or I'm even in like Knoxville or whatever. Yeah. Even Nashville, you're like, wow, this is a different vibe. Like,
totally.
But I really enjoy like the challenge of rural audiences because I think it makes me aware of just how like justice warrior and left we are here, and like one of the things I want to do with comedy is like try to not just play for my team, like
bring everyone together,
or just figure out like, oh, I'm out here in the country, like family, like what there are. I think we still agree on most stuff. Like,
it's just the ways to get there is the disagreement, but the media makes us like pins us against each other in this way, where we become caricatures to the other side.
And the loudest,
and they are
ones
to us.
So like, is there like an equivalent up there where you like you can go out and the Northeast?
Like the opposite. I would say actually,
is it all pretty liberal, or is there like you go places that are red too? Do you ever do comedy?
It's neoliberal, which to me is the worst kind, which is like you say all the right things, and then the moment there's like a homeless person on your stoop, you like become like a MAGA Republican, where it's just like where I'm like, it's just like you're just Republicans with gay friends, like because for as liberal as it is, it's also the like epicenter of American wealth. So it's just like, I mean, I'll fucking fuck you motherfuckers. There's like a comedian right now that's like bought a comedy club with his parents' money. Like one of the biggest comedians right now is he's like an inspiration in that he like filmed his first special and distributed it all on his own, and he built his own audience. It's like, and then I was like reading it because I was like, oh, I want to learn from this. And then a huge part that like no one talks about is like, and that's when he decided to take $60K and it's like, whoa. No one who's grinding as a stand-up comedian for 10 years just has a loose $60K to throw at a comedy special in a distribution network. It's just like, that's like a huge. So I just think the thing about New York is like, for as like woke and cool people say they are, it's also this, it's almost like social currency rather than like a general interest.
I know that's what really, and I think that's
genuine
about
interest.
As evil as you can fucking be, is that you've figured out how to like virtue signal to get what you want, and it's not even what you believe. Like to me, it's like I'd rather you say something racist to me and mean it than be like lying about who you are so you can get to and so that's sometimes I can kind of like I think you kind of want a little bit of like a mix in a room. Like
Yeah.
I've seen people get like run out of our scene because they come in with just a little toxic masculinity. And it's like, get him out of here. This is our room. And it's like, maybe if we let that dude hang out with us for 6 months, he'd actually become a little more sensitive and
then
cool.
he goes to Raleigh and he's like the most leftist dude there. They're like, wow, this guy's too progressive.
Yeah.
No, it's weird.
It's
And
like
I don't buy it at all.
Like comedy is so loud. I mean, are there even comedians that aren't left? Like, do you see
in New York?
Like, publicly, like on the stage?
So many.
Oh, really?
Yeah. There's like a whole, I would say like
people get up on stage and say things that are not left.
I feel comfortable. Yeah, totally.
Okay.
In New York, there's like a huge, it's mostly like certain clubs in Manhattan. And it's like, there's comics that have definitely like their jokes come from a far right place. It's like anything. I mean, everyone.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But again,
I thought it was just Nick DiPaolo and every other comedian.
No. Aaron Berg, Ryan Long. There's comedians. I'm not shitting on it. I'm just saying that they have like they're definitely like going for that audience.
It's like the Chappelle Rogan thing is full of shit. Is a little. It feels like that. I thought that it's like we like guns or whatever and saying and freedom of speech, but never like Trump's good. You know, I never heard anyone say that.
Right. Well, I mean,
but then it's like half the people are voting for him, so it's kind of weird to be. I'm like, one of the things I love about comedy is the diversity, like by far most diverse, like ages, cultural backgrounds of any group I've ever been in. So I love that. But then it's still like, well, there's like half the country, that I don't on stage. I don't hear those ideas, but then I'll go out to the country and try to like connect with them. But then other people are like, why are you going out there? This is, and it's like, I don't know. Can we?
Here's what I would do if I were a very famous, if I was on a Chappelle level, instead of just like going to comedy clubs and bumping all your coworkers and doing 2 hours of stand up, why don't you go just like call some sort of venue it doesn't have to be middle of nowhere, but just start hitting up venues, be like, hey, I want to do a gig, like set it up like comics like us would set up a road gig and be like, I am Dave Chappelle, like just say they're having a comedy night and I don't care how many people there come, I just want to go and work out jokes in a room with people that like don't know me, might not know stand-up comedy, just like that. I feel like the hardest gigs make you better.
Totally.
And it's like if you're that famous, you're gonna have trouble not running into like sycophants or just like people that are just happy to see you because you're there.
Yeah.
So it's like you got to create those opportunities. I think that's why like Doug Stanhope is cool.
Yeah.
Because like I don't even watch or listen to that much of his stuff, but I've liked a lot of what I have heard. But I also just like his lifestyle. He just lives in like a completely non-showbiz town.
And he doesn't, when he's not like on tour, he doesn't like hit the weekly. This idea that like if you're not going out every week, you're atrophying, you're finished. Like I think he just goes home and like chills for like a year, right? Like between.
Yeah, he just fucks and he writes.
That's like counters to every piece of advice you would hear from comedians.
Right.
You have to be next to the mics every week.
I feel like it's like. When I was in New York till 2020, from like 2014/15 to 2020, and then left then was in North Carolina for a few
let's
years.
do the timeline real quick because I was kind of curious about that. I know you're like bounced between North Carolina and New York.
Well, I started in New York, and I think it was really beneficial. Like, here's what I would say. I'm glad I did the like as many sets as I can in the first however many years. Like, but I think after like 5 years, 4 years, you can kind of calm down and like not just like hustle for
like set
sets.
a marathon. Like if you're gonna burn out, maybe something like that. Like
you can. I mean, it depends on what you're working on. Like if you love doing stand up all the time, which I do. Like I would do 7 shows a week, or I would do like 20 shows a week if I could. I would do as many shows a week as I could.
Same, as long as I didn't have to do all that other shit I have to do.
I know, right, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I would do it every night for like an hour if I could.
I love it so much, but I don't think you need to go like grind to do. Like, I don't think you need like. I think you just got to like build up the muscle and the writing habits, and then once you've kind of like solidified yourself, like your voice on stage. I know voices change, but like. You figured out what kind of jokes you do. Like you can just enjoy your life.
Yeah.
You don't have to be getting on stage.
Live beside it, because arguably going out and living your life gives you more of a unique perspective on stage.
Right.
If you're just at open mics every night, you don't have anything else to talk about.
Yeah.
You said something in there, writing techniques or writing. Like, what does that look like for you? How do you?
So lazy.
An idea to like the finished bit.
I've noticed that like usually all my like when I've pumped out material, it's usually in spurts, and it will be like if I write one joke and it's working, gives me the confidence and puts me in the mindset to write the next joke, and they don't even have to be the same subject or like it's topic. It's just like maybe like I just feel in the zone as a writer, and then I'll have like months where I don't write any new full bits.
But are you actually like?
No, I don't do that.
Okay,
I
it's
write
like a bullet point and you're talking to yourself, or you're just thinking about it hard, or you're at
I'll
pen
say
to paper?
something or think something and then write it down, like just like a phrase or something, and then I'll just go up and try to explain the bit.
Like you just have a sense there's some funny conflict there.
Yeah.
But you just have written down enough to try to find. You're actually trying to find the punches on stage.
Yeah, I'm trying to find the. Well, I'll usually have thought of one where I'm like, I've done stand up long enough to know that this will probably work, and then everything after that, like it's I tag a lot of my tags just come from riffing on the like writing on stage. That's what I say. Like the premise is something I've already thought about. Maybe like one of the initial punchlines is something I've thought about. I remember riffing something that was like, it was on a show, and I riffed this bit about, the bit is about Captain America. Like it's the bit, I'm Jewish, and the bit is about like, you can tell Jews are different from all other people that experience racism because we're the only ones that like it when non-Jews save us in movies. Like we love it. Like, and then it's like the like Schindler's List, Inglourious Basterds, and then like Captain America like stops, like they hit the Nazis, and it's like that's pretty crazy.
Captain America's not Jewish.
No, yeah, with his blue eyes. Yeah, I was like, what? You could have just made him Jewish. He was written by Jewish people. That's how much Jewish people love.
I would like to see a Jewish. They're doing the reboot now of like the more like
really?
the new Marvel like Phase 3 is like not all just white dudes.
Oh, okay.
So maybe like Captain America could be Jewish, like for the next round. I think
right.
they're making a point
Jewish.
to realize
Ethiopian Jew. There we go. Black Ethiopian Jew. Which would actually that would be Captain Ethiopia. That'd be weird if he was Captain America, an Ethiopian guy. So I just got here, but I think I should represent the country. I mean, that'd be a funny way to troll like racist people though. I was like, now he's Ethiopian. He's not even from America.
So you just knew, like with that joke, you felt like there was just something there that was.
Yeah, I was just like you wouldn't like black folks wouldn't like that. Like you would never like
the white savior.
Blonde Captain America can save the Jews, but you can't have like white Spider-Man and slavery,
right?
And it's just like Robert. But then the thing was like that got the pop. But then it's like an impression of Robert E. Lee being like, "That damn Spider-Man is at it again. He's been webbing my plantations."
I like that. It's just like a little more absurd with each one. Now you've got Robert E. Lee at the same universe and time as Spider. Like that's just kind of funny, but even all by itself,
right.
Like, why is he talking about Spider-Man?
yeah. It's just a fun like combination, and it's so silly. It's one of those bits I don't do it all that often, but I really like it, and I should. Sometimes I'll have a bit and I'll kind of lay off it for a while, not like intentionally. I just like, well, it won't be in my act anymore.
Yeah, give it some air.
Yeah, and then I'll do it again. And I'll be like, man, I like did it better than I ever did before.
Yes. Yeah.
And I have a video of me doing that I still haven't been fucking sent by this venue that was like, you don't got to tape. We tape everything. And but I really
and that
want
was the time where you like nailed it.
Wrote so much on it while I was doing it, and I like, man, it's like Robert E. Lee like creates a mutant to fight him. and the mutant's name is Whipping Post, and it's it's all, and it's like,
and you didn't even think of that before. You were just on stage, kind of just finding those things.
The Whipping Post one, when I did that part I had thought about, but I had been in New York in so long, and I was like, is that like an offensive thing? The whole point is that it's not, it's tone deaf. Like the whole point of it,
right?
Which it's like, but I'm not trying to do a bit where I'm like, yeah, and here's all the things you don't that you think, and that, like, I'm not trying to be an anti-woke comic. I'm trying.
It's hard to imagine you coming off that way. Like, do you think about that as far as like, I'll try to like usually start clean and build the dirty. So I'm going to talk about like drugs. I'll usually be like, hey, I'm a dad earlier. Right. You know what I mean? Like, do you feel like with something like that, it'd be different coming out of the gate, opening with it versus like establishing yourself as like a socially aware, empathetic person, and then people kind of know by the time you're like,
yeah. Well, there's certain bits I like to do later in my act. Oh, you know what's funny is like I have this bit about Pryor. I don't know if you've seen me do it. I think I did it at that Good Nights night, but I'm not sure. It's a bit about Chappelle does all the trans jokes, and then I was talking to comics, and the one comic was like, "What do you think it'd be like if Carlin or Pryor were around right now? What would they say?" And you know, so I've noticed in rural audiences, if I start that joke, they all think I'm going to go in this direction where I'm like, yeah, I bet Carlin and Pryor would say some really offensive shit. But that's not what I do. I first, it's almost kind of like, it kind of lulls them to sleep, where I do a bit about, no, I actually think, like, I know Carlin didn't mind saying offensive words. He actually thought without, like, the context of the words is what makes them good or bad. But, like, just saying a word by itself. But I also know he hated comedians that would punch down. And so he would, like, what I think he would do is use offensive language to make fun of the transphobic community rather than like the other way around. And then the next line is like, and Richard Pryor, I think, would be different. What he'd say about the trans community is, I like fucking them. Because he was just so like, and I love doing that bit, but it's funny when I do that, they think I'm going to say Carlin and Pryor would have been more offensive than Chappelle, but I like laying it out there that like, I actually think like if like the way they wrote, if they were in their prime right now with everything that's going on, I don't think they would be doing what Chappelle's doing. I think Pryor would do something maybe a little closer.
I love this idea that as you're saying it, you're like, you can sort of feel what they might want or what they're expecting. Like, I think that's like the great gift of comedy is just this awareness. It's almost like gravity. There's some invisible force. And the more you get up in different rooms, the more you can kind of feel what other people are expecting or feeling. And I just love that. It's a certain kind of magic. Like master comedians are just very aware. And we live in a world that's increasingly virtual, so it's like I think it's becoming kind of like a lost art to actually be aware of like the room and what people are feeling and differences between different audiences. I
100%. I think it's very the more I do stand up, the more I'm like we had it was such a bad gig. We had this gig in Mooresville. Right. Mooresville's great. Sorry, I want to do the gig again. Hopefully they have an audience that's cool next time. But we did this gig, and so me and Kenyon were like, well, where do you want to go up? Do you want to go first, second? And we he was like, I'll go first if you want. And I was like, are you sure? And he was like, yeah, sure. And he suffered from that because he went first. We didn't know who the host was going to be. The host was so bad. He was so bad. He was just like so delusional and terrible for the environment. It was a red room. And he was like seemed high. And then he like opened with, I got too high for this gig. And and he had a bit to go along with it. But then it just seemed like he was high too. So I was like, oh, I thought that was a joke, like to play on your persona. And then he just, as a host, first of all, I said, before the show started, I was like, you know, it's better for the show if I go on stage and just like do like, hey, turn off your phones, I'll be here later, but I'm gonna bring on your host. Like do some announcements, kind of like have like some, it's okay that there's dead air for a second. Bring you on so you can just get into it. And he just bombed. Didn't acknowledge he was bombing, didn't do any like host work to make the room warm. Then he fucked up Kenyon's name, and then Kenyon came up and just had to start from like zero. And they were already terrible. Like they were.
Sounds like negative, not even zero, but like
it was
like
bad.
It was a mistake coming here.
Yeah, his biggest laugh was like a racist laugh because he has a bit about like first I love Trump because he's like very not.
His biggest laugh was a racist laugh.
Well, he was
no.
He did a bit about his mom is El Salvadorian and he had a bit. It was like I love Trump because and he's obviously being tongue in cheek with this. He was like, at first I loved Trump because I was like, oh, he's going to deport half my family. I fucking hate those people. And then he got like a huge laugh.
That's better than I thought it would be.
Yeah. It was like, his joke is just like, my cousins are annoying.
Yeah.
He's not like actually like, fuck that. I hate that I'm El Salvadorian.
Yeah.
But they like, were like, yeah. And it was like, okay, and then like, I got on stage and I just trashed them for like 10 minutes in like a fun way.
Yeah.
If I have you have your skills as a comedian and then you have your ones that you're like, this is like, if I were to have a gift, it'd be saying something mean and not losing the audience. I feel like
you can roast them and still remain lovable.
Yeah. And
that's
also,
great. That's a great,
because I don't do it like I'm mad at them. I just do it like, oh, look at you guys finally fucking talking. Like they're like, a smile goes a long way. And with everything, it's just crazy how much. Like sometimes I'll do stand up and
so you're mindful of that. Are you like you keep smiling?
Oh,
when
I'll
you're
do a
up
fake
there.
smile if I have to.
Yeah.
But I've noticed sometimes I'm not in a happy mood and I'll be doing a set and things won't be hidden the same way they usually do, and I'll realize it's because I am just like kind of doing this kind of. Not monotone, but like I'm whatever the facial version of monotone is. Like I'm just not.
You need to like be a little more of a cartoon character.
Yeah,
so bring a little more like Bugs Bunny in, or a little more like.
And certain like I've noticed sometimes I'll have like a lackluster like first 5 minutes or something if I'm doing like 30, and then I'll just be like, you know what I need to do, because this always works as a good trick, is like get like angry on stage at. Like instead of doing a premise like just regular, I just gotta get mad about a premise right now. Like, and you know what drives me insane. Like that kind of like gets the show's blood pumping.
Like do the next bit like you're Bill Burr or something. Like
basically
do something where that's interesting.
Yeah,
is that something you think about like? In general, like the emotion that's associated with a bit, like what?
Well, but I like to be able to do it in any emotion because I feel like if you're attached to one delivery system, it's it's not always gonna.
Attached to one delivery system. That's a nice way.
If you're like not. So if you do something with a lot of energy and it kills, you got to find out if it would kill if you're just kind of like saying it offhand. Right. And it's like important.
With the Chris Rock thing where it's like, first I got to just make the words be funny before
I think I did steal that from Chris Rock maybe.
He's like, I'm not even going to be yelling and moving around until I know the words are funny on their own.
Right. Yeah. Which is great because then he has that fucking like, he has like such a cadence and a way of performing that's, but then I guess that's like why I hate people like Kinnison. I'm like, oh, this writing sucks. You're just yelling it.
And you're say the setup and then shout the punchline. Yeah. I never really understood it. I listened to a podcast with Quentin Tarantino like sometime recently, and he was like talking about how he went and saw Kinnison in the 80s. Like, and how it changed his life, and he was like the greatest performer ever.
Really?
It's just like I feel like I hear that so often.
Yeah.
Like, of course, he's like just the most amazing comedian. Then I watch it and I go, what am I? So it's nice that somebody else maybe doesn't get Kinnison.
He does have good bits before he's famous that he has this really funny bit about like how he was like I'm gonna ruin it, but basically he's saying like before I was your baby. It's like him talking to his parents like. I was like, and then he goes into this whole diatribe about like how he was one with the universe. He was everywhere all at once. He was the sun, the moon, like basically just like existentialism. And he's like, but then you had to fuck and bring me into this shithole. And I like that bit. I think it's like, oh, that's like a really cool, like really sophisticated premise to work with. But then he just like devolved into like wearing a beret and like just screaming about like gay people, fuck them, rappers, fuck that. He always has like homophobic undertones, racist undertones. He just like has all this. There's something like the types, like I love 80s rock, but the types of dudes that like think like hip hop. I even have a bit about this, about how Rodney King is what killed rock and roll, because like rock stars were like, yeah man, fuck the cops, they won't even let us party. And then the Rodney King footage came out. I was like, oh, their problem with cops is way worse, because like rock were like the badass white guys, and then it was just like, it made everyone seem like less anti-establishment when you actually don't have like, it's okay if you get arrested for like breaking a hotel room. That's actually pretty reasonable. Yeah. Like if you throw a TV out the window, like you should probably go to jail for that. Like that's not an actual, like you're not getting held down. You know, that's so it was just a bit about that. But like I feel like Kinnison like almost exemplifies the dude that's like, these rappers are ruining like music. Like it's not like it was with Twisted Sister, like that type of shit. Yeah, yeah. And I fucking love rock and roll. So like for some reason I've always really liked talking about, it's not like I like talking about other races specifically. I like talking about white complaints that are so specific to white people that seem ridiculous to me at this point. And that's kind of the thing I hate about certain people in Brooklyn, and I'm sure they exist in Nashville too, where I'm just like, you're kind of just you're trying to make your life sound harder than it is by like inventing a way that someone can be like prejudiced against you. Whereas like it seems like people of other races, they hear all this offensive shit thrown at them all the time, and they just keep their head down and they just are like, this sucks, but like it's not. But it was like white people.
There's an entitlement in the version, spinning it to victimize yourself.
Yeah, and it's just
loudly, and it's like people that are doing worse than you in every like metric,
right?
Or like just kind of, there's like a quiet like what's it called, integrity or something. You just go to your job, go about your business. Yeah, it is weird. I mean, because I moved here because I grew up in the Southeast, and I was always like a really liberal. I'm from Oak Ridge, Tennessee.
Oh, cool.
Which is actually also a little liberal bubble in Tennessee. It's got its own crazy.
Is it close to here?
It's like near Knoxville, so it's like 2.5 hours away. So I moved here for the super like liberal, which is like what I've always been. But now just like getting older and just the divisiveness, it's like I am kind of trying to like. It's good to hang out with different types of people, not just different types of liberals, but different types of people. Yeah, for sure. But even just trying to present that idea to my liberal friends in Asheville, sometimes it could be a little like, wait a second, whose side are you on? Right. So it's just kind of like, I don't know. There's something there that I'm trying to kind of nudge at with comedy in some way. And I even see those divisions within, like the Marin, Rogan, like which side are you on? It's like, neither, you know. It's just, we're all just talking about our experiences and trying to connect with as many people as possible.
Yeah, totally. I kind of think one thing I want to be cognizant of though is like when like we can go and talk to these rural areas, right? But we also like, I'm not saying, but though like a lot of people can't, like if, from different like groups, like if you're trans or queer or like anything like that. I'm not saying they can't do that.
I think a lot of
it's
times
like a
they
different
can't,
ask to do it. Though.
Totally. I mean, to be like a trans performer and go to Tennessee and do a rural show, that sounds. I could see that being like unsafe.
Fuck.
For real.
Yeah, and like fearful in the real way.
But I almost think like if I come first, with these glasses and say my ideas, and then maybe like a few years later the trans person could come. You know what I mean? Like it starts with this, you know. They're like, I don't know, it's not totally different than me. Right. And then it's like with each way.
Yeah, just like then it's just like a black amputee comes. Yeah. And then you're just like eventually you just get to like. You just arrive with like a school full of people of all different walks of life.
I mean, I think the black amputee from my like limited experience would do well. That it's like I've even like had like like black comics be like rural white people are actually more similar to black people than these like privileged entitled whites. But I think the trans that's definitely a thing that's like newer and more threatening. That I think that's going to be a minute. You know,
they're being like described as like fucking groomers and pedophile, like it's like by the right, like certain people on the right are being like characterizing like drag performers and trans people as like these predators. So if you're these like a 70-year-old like complete like all you watch is Fox News and eat like completely unseasoned meat all the time, like you might start to believe that. So like it becomes so dangerous for the trans person to be there because they're being, it's not just you're different. you're being billed as a criminal, and these people are fucking morons that think that, but they're also just like, I mean, tribalism gets crazy.
Yeah.
And that kind of,
for sure. Yeah, and that's like what I like about the comedy community is I feel like it's just more diverse than any, like my work crew, my like parents crew, you know, whatever other common interest there is.
Yeah.
It's demographically so different.
You're a musician, right?
Yeah.
So have you ever seen a movie? It's kind of like the fear. It's like the encapsulation of the fear that we're talking about with like going to different areas or the fear that a trans person would have. Have you seen the movie Green Room?
I don't think so.
You should watch it, man. It's such a good movie. Do you like horror movies?
I mean, it's a little bit.
It's more like
is it like
gross action or a gross thriller.
Okay.
Like there's like one particular scene where like
gory gross.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
Like
but like okay, so it's called Green Room. It's about this punk band who is on tour and they're like real broke and like they're like siphoning gas and shit like that, and they're and so then they need gas money to get back to, I think they live in like the DC area or something. So, and I think they're in West Virginia or Tennessee or something. And it's such a good movie. I should rewatch it soon. It's so good.
Is it recent? Green Room? Is it
it's like within the last 8 years?
Okay, yeah, last decade.
Do you know Maybe Funke from Arrested Development?
Yeah.
Do you remember it's her? She's in it.
Okay.
That kid from, what's his name? He died in a really tragic way, like with some car hit him or something. He has some interesting name. And Jean-Luc Picard is the villain, and he's amazing in it. What's his name? What?
I know the guy. I mean,
Patrick Stewart. Patrick Stewart. But it's about this punk band. So then this weird kind of like punk like booker is like, I got you a gig. It's kind of a weird place, but like just do your hardcore shit and they'll love you. He's like, it's off and on as like a neo-Nazi like hangout. And so they're like, fuck. And so they like, it's cool. One of the cool scenes is like, there's like, let's just
in the United States, like in the present day.
Yeah.
There's like places, there's like rooms that are like,
neo-Nazis. Okay. I'm sure. Well, it's like,
Jesus.
It's legit like they're like trying to form, it's like a militia, neo-Nazi militia thing.
Yeah.
And so they like play the Dead Kennedys, like Nazi punks fuck off as like their opening song. And then they witness a murder in the green room. And so then they are held hostage by the neo-Nazis in the green room. And it's kind of like a thing where they like barricade and then they like, I just don't want to give it, it's so tense, but it's like the best. Like, well, that's a hell gig.
Is it like a fictional? Is it like based on true?
It's fictional, but I think it's written by a guy that was in a punk band, and he would run into like hellish scenarios.
It's kind of like stand up. It's like, well, things like this happen, so let's cram it into a story so the idea can get to people.
I don't like. I was watching footage. Who's that guy? He has like short hair. He kind of looks like a military guy, but he performed shirtless. 80s. It's like really hardcore shit. He was a talking head on like I Love the 80s shit.
A musician from the 80s?
Yeah.
Shirtless?
Yeah.
Looks like
short hair, kind of jacked, did like yoga before getting on stage.
You know what genre
like,
of music?
Like, I think it would just be like hardcore because it's like
Rollins?
Yes.
Yeah.
Rollins.
Yeah.
Like that
Black
kind of
Flag,
music. Like, I'm really like happy there's an audience and musicians that like they can come together and find each other. But that's the only kind of music where I'm watching and I'm like, I'm not understanding the appeal.
I don't want to be in that room. It's a little like Kinnison, honestly. It's like, that seems scary. Like, I don't want to be in that room, but I'm glad that aggression has a place to.
Right.
I guess they're getting out some shit that they might use to do less artistic hate crimes.
Right. Like death metal, I don't really enjoy death metal.
Yeah.
But every time I meet a huge death metal fan, they're always like the sweetest, gentlest guys.
Usually like real smart and like well read and stuff too. And you're like,
it's really nice.
Yeah,
they're a little bit asexual.
Yeah,
there's something like kind of just like you're just not threatening and you're very warm, like which is really cool.
I think a lot of it might be like my sense from sampling people in that community. That's a wrong word to use, but
I'm sampling.
Talking about white metalheads, so you know. But is that maybe there's like trauma and abuse earlier, or some, they're like big feelings people, and then you have to put up this like tough. So you look at them like outside the building, and it's like, oh, there's like a bunch of murderers hanging out. But then if you actually get in, they're like really sweet. It's like very community minded. Let's take care of ourselves because the government's not going to take care of us. It's almost like there's a sweetness in there,
right?
When you get in, or I just catch glimpses where
a little bit of goth people are sometimes like that.
Yeah,
but goth people kind of, it feels less like, oh, you're a cool sweetheart. You're just kind of like a quiet kind of loser. I mean, not like, I don't mean.
I mean, comedians are losers. I don't think it's
we are the biggest
right?
loser. I think we were like half our jokes are like comebacks from like arguments that we lost in real time.
Still, all the
it's like I finally thought of what to say if I had been.
That's the perfect metaphor. It's just that. It's like controlling how people laugh at you.
Yeah. Which I mean, yeah. I feel like that's why it's always important to like stay connected to your, like as a comedian, I feel like just like staying connected to your buddies from childhood because they knew you when you were maybe a loser, or I don't think of myself as like a former actual loser. I just was like super quiet, shy and small, so I like didn't have like any voice at all. So it's like good.
I would not have guessed that.
Really, you thought it was like really probably a cool guy, or
I don't know, confident, handsome.
That was like college, I guess. I came that once I found out that like just like being like confident was like confident and yourself. It's like that is great news. Like that women liked that and stuff like that, and people like that because
the Times kind of helped catch up to that a little bit more. I think. I think like my persona was not good for the 80s and 90s, but now it's like being a sensitive dude is kind of like accepted. Whereas like it was just being called gay every day for like
if you like anything sensitive,
and it was like gay is like it was not a good thing then.
Right. It is funny. I'll feel like I don't identify as non-binary or anything, but I'm kind of like when people don't understand it, I'm like, how could you not? It's just like like I don't want to go by they them, but like
even the trans thing, even like before the first time I heard it, I was like, well, that kind of makes sense, I've been David Bowie or whatever. I mean, this whole I always loved androgyny. I always loved
me too.
The dudes that were my favorite were the ones that weren't necessarily like they didn't have the jaw and the masculine kind of thing. Right. To me, it always kind of made sense.
Right. Bowie is the coolest motherfucker. I think he might be like top 5 coolest people to ever live. You mentioned
someone earlier in this conversation about recreating yourself.
Yeah, he did a billion times.
Bob Dylan, and like Taylor Swift's kind of doing that in pop culture now. But some people like stay steadfast, like Neil Young. But then some people are like, each album is an era, and you like destroy that version. And that's cool. I forget who we were just talking about that.
And Bruce Springsteen just does it with different states.
Right.
It's like, no, I'm in Nebraska. Let me tell you what the working class people are like here.
Yeah. It's a good way to do it. You got like,
I think more options. My favorite artist of all time, I know he's he did a bunch of bad shit, but he's dead, is Michael Jackson. I love Michael Jackson, and I love him specifically because it's like
music of all time.
I know.
That kid had so much fucking talent. He's the most beautiful kid of all time.
Yeah.
And I'm sure horrific shit happened to him.
I know. I give him and
he's fucked up. And he did fucked up shit. Like
this is how I explain it.
Like, come on. He's a victim of this. All that happened, he's a victim too.
Yeah. I think he's the ultimate, like it's the ultimate like hurt people story, because it's like little kid being hurt, traumatically abused by his dad, his brothers, like they were forced to like watch his dad like cheat on their mom, like put in closets and like watch his dad fuck like groupies and stuff. And then so he does it, and he doesn't have a childhood, and then it's just like eventually he does something like the Pepsi commercial gets set on fire, like they prescribe him like opiates, he gets like aggressively addicted to opiates, and his whole life is people just giving him what he wants off stage so he'll go do his thing on stage. Right. So it's like he has no like checks and balances in his behavior.
Yeah.
They're just like, we just let him do, because he's a $1 billion industry.
Yeah.
So it's just like, but anyway, I just feel
like Elvis. They were like, just eat some more speed and do like 8 shows a day. Just destroy it. Yeah, you take somebody who's so beautiful and has so much to offer and just destroy it.
Really.
Best music of all time.
I know.
This will be the end where I just cut this part off where I like just start defending Michael Jackson.
Well, greatest artist, his music,
great man.
Yeah. But you talk about someone who like
totally.
Like he broke himself.
Yeah, before and after, it's like, and now music is something else forever. Around the whole world because you came along. Yeah,
his big 3 albums are like all so like I know he has like his last album that he came out with before he died, I fucking love that album, and it kind of got buried by Sony because that was like when he was at odds with them, and they were like they were pissed at him because he wouldn't tour the album. He was like,
which one?
No, this was in 2000 or 2001. It was called Invincible.
Later, all right.
It was way later.
Yeah.
But it's fascinating because one thing I love about Michael Jackson is that he always loved hip hop. So he always like once him and Quincy Jones. I mean, I know there's hip hop influence in Bad and in Thriller to a certain degree, especially like the Bad music video is like heavily hip hop influenced, and the Beat It video is also hip hop influenced. But like his first album without Quincy Jones, it's like most of the beats are like early 90s, late 80s hip hop beats. It's called Dangerous. It's the one with like his eyes and it's and then but Invincible, it's like he has songs with like Biggie and like Babyface, who's like an R&B writer. He's one of the producers.
Oh, that's cool. I didn't know about that.
It's really cool.
He's like open to what's happening now. He's not stuck in
he loved hip hop, and so he wanted to kind of ingratiate himself into it. So it's just him singing, and he has like such a perfect voice, and it's just like him kind of trying his hand at like hip hop inspired R&B, and it's really good. Like I think it's the one. Do you remember that song "You Rock My World"?
Like 2000s Michael?
Yeah.
I don't think I can even think
that
of
was the
Black or White. I think is as late as I can even recall.
Well, I'll DM you some of his songs, and they're like beautiful R&B songs, and it's like, and it's also kind of like back to his roots, which is like like
Jackson 5 stuff. Like
Motown.
Yeah.
And I love his disco album. The Off the Wall is I think that might be the one that I can just put on the most.
It's like Man in the Mirror on it.
No, that one's bad.
I really don't.
It's like Don't Stop Till You Get Enough.
I know Thriller, and then I just kind of know like the hits. I think.
Yeah.
Thriller. No,
that's how a lot of people are. I'm just a specifically like It's like a dysfunction how much I watched Michael Jackson stuff.
Well, it's very like meta. I think it's a very right now concept that there's the artist, but there's also like what the media did to the artist and all that too. So he was almost like I don't know, Kanye or somebody now, like Rogan or whatever, just the scandalous like modern times. I think he was kind of ahead of his time in that way.
He was ahead of his time.
That's not the right way to
he
put
also
it.
He was ahead of his time in being a bad guy.
Ahead maybe wasn't the right.
That's funny.
I don't know.
We gotta go.
We're at an hour 22, so I've cut you long enough. But thank you so much for doing the pod.
Course,
it was very fun.
Did
Harrison,
the on camera shake.
Yeah.